Christ all, this is James, aka JP Harker, here with another comparison of book to film, and today we are doing The Name of the Rose by Umberto Eco. I do hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Now we have, the film here is a Sean Connery classic. It's, I believe, Christian Slater's first film as well, and it's very, very good, and this is the novel. They compare, interestingly, it's awkward holding them both up, so I'm just going to hold this up. They compare interestingly. The story is ostensibly a murder mystery. Now, we've all seen Cadfael, and so we all have this familiarity with, it's the medieval monk who's using his logic and his knowledge of things like herbalism to solve the mystery in a Sherlock Holmesy way. But this, while on the one hand it's very obviously a Sherlock Holmes, the character is even called William of Baskerville, and the description is almost word for word Sherlock Holmes. It's a tall man made to seem even taller by his excessive thinness. That's exactly how Watson describes Holmes. But while it's a little bit more on the nose with that, it's less to do with a murder mystery. Now the Cadfael books, they had some context. I'm sure I have one here and I'd wave it, but I'm not sure where it is. They have some context because they take part during the anarchy, and so you have, because they're in Shrewsbury, which is near the Welsh border, they have this idea of Cadfael's Abbey is in an area loyal to King Stephen, but there are people around who are loyal to Empress Maud, and so there's a degree of political context going on. This, the focus isn't on the murders especially, the focus is mainly on religious politics, because our hero, William of Baskerville, is a Franciscan monk, and we get an awful lot of info in the book at least about the politicking going on with the Pope in Avignon and the Holy Roman Emperor and the various different groups and factions that are formed in the church and the various beliefs that they have. And I find it both interesting and there's a tension in it that one doesn't really appreciate at face value, because they talk about the debates that these people have. We have this notion of the medieval church being, we are right and any form of argument, you're going to burn for it. And while that's a background thought, debate was also very common, and minor points of spirituality and theology and day-to-day life, they were contested. And there were academic debates where they would cite not just scripture, but also the writings of people like Thomas Aquinas, and people like Bacon, and even people like Aristotle. And I find that really interesting. But there's this tension because we hear about this debate was made, that debate was made, and then casually someone will say, yeah, well, he made that argument, and they burn him alive for it. So it's an intellectual discussion where the result could end up with you being burned alive as a heretic. And that just adds a little spice to the intellectual discussion. The big one is about the alleged poverty of Christ and his followers, and if they owned their own clothes, does that justify materialism? If they didn't own their own clothes, were they partaking of charity? How does that affect what the church has now? Because the Catholic Church, as you know, is very rich, because they say, well, if the pagans build big temples and have gold stuff to glorify their gods, well, we should do one better, because our god's a better god, so we should do more. And then you've got Franciscans who say, no, we should be humble and we should do less. And again, you can probably tell, I find the debate interesting. But set alongside this is a series of murders and an interesting, not quite a whodunit, but an interesting following of clues and trying to work out motive and method that I enjoy. So, overall, in terms of the book and the film, I enjoy them. But let's have a look at comparing them. In the film, very, very good film, they focus in a lot more, understandably, on the relationship between William and his apprentice, because we're seeing it all through his apprentice's eyes. We see this wonderful mentor and apprentice relationship going on, and we see these sinister murders going on and the causes behind them, and the wider political and theological stuff takes a back seat. It's not necessarily a bad thing. I remember thinking this when I made my Ivanhoe video. I find it very hard comparing books and films because the medium is so very different. If I was writing this as a book, I'd write it the way this has been written. I'd include all of this context. I'd include all of this detail because it adds good sense to why the characters are behaving the way they do. When it's a film, you've got limited time. You've just got to get those motivations in early and just behave consistently with them. And they managed that terrifically with these. I'm going to show it again. I like the camera. We got the feeling from Sean Connery's William of Baskerville that he was a believer in the Franciscan ideals. We got the idea from his apprentice that he was being educated into these ideals. We got the impression from Ubertino and from the abbot and from the inquisitor. We got enough in the film to understand where they were coming from. And it left us questioning and wanting more, maybe to read the book, but it was all we needed. And the rest of the film was nicely paced, lots of murder and conspiracy and bittersweetness in the ending. But they did a good enough job in showing us here's why these people are acting in the way they are, here's what they believe in, here's how far they will go for what they believe in, that it worked. In this, if anything, we're getting a little bit too much of that, but it still works. I don't read it and feel bored. There's a huge amount of detail in there, but I'm still engaged, partly because I'm interested in this period in history and in these debates themselves, but partly because I think it's written in an interesting way. And it's written for a reason. It isn't world building for the sake of world building. It isn't research for the sake of showing what research has been done. It's showing us why Adzo, who is our protagonist, and to an extent William and the others, why are they doing what they're doing? Why are they not, well, he should just do this? Because from a modern mindset you'd think, well, why don't they just look at this? Why don't they just tell them that? It gives all the answers to why they don't do that and why they do this. And I find that interesting. The last comparison I'll make book to film is one that I find quite funny, and it's only a minor spoiler. There's a library in this monastery which has forbidden heretical works in it. And so it's made in this sort of labyrinth structure. But because you can't really see much light from outside, there's hexagonal rooms, and some of them the doors lead nowhere, and some of them they connect, and some of them they don't, and there's corridors and drops, and you can't access it from outside, so it's a terrible labyrinth. And in the book, they go outside and they draw a sketch of the building, and they work out through geometry which one faces west, and they look at the carvings on the doors and the various beasts, and they work out a code of which book is where, and the Greek alphabet, and all that. And in the film, they literally use a piece of string. They literally use the Greek labyrinth solution of, we're lost, what do we do? Tie a bit of string to here, and we'll walk around and we'll know where we've been because of the piece of string. And it works. And I almost feel bad for Umberto Eco, because he clearly put so much thought into this elaborate labyrinth. And it's like, how do you solve it? String. So that tickled me a little bit. But I'm gonna round it off there with that bit of amusement. And again, I'm going to recommend both. And I don't particularly have a preference for order in this one. Read the book if you want a lot of context for the film. Watch the film if you want to have an idea of what's going on, if you're not as comfortable with all the detail and you'd like a visual picture of where we're going without all of this detail first. So either one works. Both are highly recommended. If you like history, if you like mystery, if you like murder, if you like monks, go for these. It is The Name of the Rose by Umberto Eco. Here is the book. Here's the film. Here is JP Harker. Thank you for watching. Will out.